Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Westminster Hall, which is an important part of the United Kingdom Parliament. This is the chamber in which we have debates, as opposed to when we consider bills and other parts of the lawmaking process, all of that occurs in the main chamber. I'm sure you're familiar with this system, but sometimes we have debates which are not concerned with the actual making of law, but with the discursive process of considering an issue. And a lot of those debates take place here, which, as you will see, is rather less formal, but nevertheless a proper parliamentary chamber. And I'm delighted to welcome you all here this morning to debate this very important matter. And since we have representatives from such a wide variety of countries, parts of the Commonwealth, indeed parts of the globe, I think this will prove to be a most interesting debate, and one to which I hope parliamentarians from all of our countries will pay attention. So the question before us this morning is that this Assembly agrees that COP21 has secured the global carbon emissions cap. And I would like to call upon Professor Lord Oxburgh to make the opening statement and to propose the motion. Sir.
Mr. Speaker, honourable parliamentarians, it's a great pleasure to be here and to open this debate. I have to say a little bit about myself. I am a strange animal in our House of Lords, and I belong to a small group of people who are appointed to the House of Lords because it is believed that they have experience or expertise that may be useful in the parliamentary process. I'm a scientist by background and have worked close to and in the questions of climate change. I don't need to remind you that over the last 150 years, the concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has steadily grown, largely through the activities of human beings. And I have to say, largely, those human beings who've been responsible have been in the developed world. The important, and for this reason, I have to say, the agreement in Paris, which I think is epoch-making, is greatly to be welcomed. It is greatly to be welcomed not only for its intrinsic content, but also because of the support and the confidence it gives to those groups working in parliamentary and other scenarios around the world who sometimes have lacked local support for promoting the case for doing something about climate change. But now they, if you like, have the endorsement of this conference of parties, and that is good. But what am I concerned about? I do have concerns. The first concern is that the individual nationally determined contributions to reducing national emissions don't really add up to what the scientific evidence tells us is really needed. We really need to do more. And there are, of course, arrangements within this which may allow us to do more, and there is an agreement that those countries that can afford to do so will do more, but they don't add up and they fall quite a lot short at the moment. The second concern I have is one of credibility. I have no doubt that all the national commitments that were made in good faith and it is the intention of those who made them to carry them out. On the other hand, we should not deceive ourselves. These are taxing commitments. They vary in the burden that they place on different countries. But if, for example, when the delegates return home from Paris, they find that there are political difficulties and they cannot implement the undertakings which they gave in Paris, this could be very serious, because it is going to cost everyone to do this. But if support gradually falls away, and if it appears that some countries are falling very much short of what we all agree, I think, is an inadequate global target, then there is a serious possibility that the whole process could unravel. So everyone must, in fact, exercise their best efforts, politically, socially, financially, in order to ensure that obligations are met. So in proposing this motion, I have to declare that I am an optimist. I am one of those who describes a glass as half full, not half empty. I think we are only partway there, but what we have seen is the first step on a long and undoubtedly difficult road, but one which I think we all need to follow. And so I have pleasure in proposing this motion.
Very much, Lord Oxborough. I'm now going to open the motion to open the debate to the floor, and each person will have 3 minutes to make their contribution. The time will be shown on these screens above you. And the first person to speak from the floor is the Honorable Senator Sylvia Garza from Mexico. Madam.
Gracias. Con su permiso, honorable Eleanor Line, honorables miembros del Parlamento de los diferentes países aquí representados. Con gran preocupación, considero que la COP21 no ha conseguido con éxito los límites a las emisiones de carbono. Lo que tenemos con el Acuerdo de París es una declaración de buena voluntad por las naciones que son partes de la Convención Marco, y tal vez un motivo de esperanza. Sin embargo, la buena voluntad no es suficiente para evitar las interferencias peligrosas en el sistema climático y definitivamente no es por sí mismo una apuesta fiable sobre el futuro de este planeta. Podemos afirmar 5 razones por las cuales considero esto que comento. La brecha entre lo que se está haciendo y lo que se requiere es enorme. Las contribuciones nacionales de mitigación, ahora asociadas con el Acuerdo de París, darían lugar a un calentamiento medio alrededor de 2.7 grados centígrados para el año 2100. Por supuesto que si no hacemos nada, podría esto elevarse a 3.6 grados centígrados. Los compromisos climáticos presentados con los INDC establecen un calentamiento inferior en aproximadamente 0.9 grados centígrados, pero por sí todos los gobiernos cumplen estas promesas. Si el Acuerdo de París verdaderamente encarna un compromiso universal para permanecer muy por debajo de los 2 grados centígrados, entonces, ¿por qué este vacío no se elimina en las negociaciones de París? Las promesas voluntarias de cada 5 años y la decisión de la COP alienta a los países a hacer más en el periodo pre-2020, un inventario oficial de emisiones solo acordado al 2023. Teniendo en cuenta que nuestra trayectoria de emisiones actuales, incluso con las promesas voluntarias, tenderá más allá de los objetivos del calentamiento que nos hemos propuesto, ¿por qué estamos esperando a 2023 para hacer un inventario? Sin embargo, No hay nada en el acuerdo que obligue a los países a hacer un esfuerzo mayor requerido. Mientras que el acuerdo está siendo descrito como legalmente vinculante, los países pueden retirarse de él sin consecuencias, como Canadá lo hizo en el Protocolo de Kioto. Ya estamos en números rojos para la estabilización de 1.5 grados. Según el doctor Michael Mann de Penn State, esto lo afirma. El crecimiento de la energía renovable está lejano de evitar el cambio climático. De acuerdo con el nuevo informe del mercado de energía renovable a medio plazo de la Agencia Internacional de Energía, más importante aún, la energía renovable.
Your sentence.
Excuse me. La energía renovable no puede crecer con la suficiente rapidez para reemplazar a los combustibles fósiles. Ni la energía nuclear ni la red global de energía eléctrica son económicamente viables en el mundo. Ninguna nación en cualquier parte del planeta ha logrado uno de ellos sin continuar con los subsidios del gobierno. Por su atención, muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. We will stick strictly to the 3 minutes, because otherwise everyone won't get in. If I was presiding in our chamber, in our real parliamentary chamber across the way there, then at 3 minutes I would say, order, and then they would stop completely. But I will be much kinder to you, ladies and gentlemen, because you are our visitors and we welcome you. The next speaker is from Sri Lanka. I call Professor the Honourable Chandrajit Marasinghe. Sir.
Honourable Speaker, the Honourable Lords is having very ambitious, dreaming targets. And also the Honourable Member from Mexico also proposing that good thoughts. But the bad news is that COP21 will not work because it will not be dealing the real problem. The unfair economic system that puts the interest of fossil fuel addicted corporations working on their own targets. Climate change will never be solved through negotiations dominated by corporate interest. Many of the same governments that are showing us fighting with the climate change are also pushing corporate trade deals like EU-US trade deal, TTIP, that will benefit the fracking the industry and supporting big agribusiness companies that undermine the ability of farmers to adapt to the climate change. These same governments use bullying and bribery tactics to ensure that the interest of their corporate friends takes over the fight against climate change. Not all countries have equal kind of talks. The richest countries are also the biggest polluters and therefore tend to be in a position to dictate the term of debate. Big countries are ringing the bell and ringing the deal also before the talks have even started to make absolutely certain that no real action is taken. These green room negotiations happen behind the closed doors, and most developing country delegations are unaware of them until they finish. It is time for us to activists and campaigners across the world to realize that the real problem and against us, and the progress will only be made if the government that represent us feel the pressure for change from grassroots level. What people want to hear was that an agreement had been reached on climate change that would save the world while leaving lifestyle unchanged. The solution it proposed is not to agree on an urgent mechanism to ensure immediate cuts in emissions, but kick the can down the road. We must look at the full spectrum of, for example, the geoengineering. This will cover initiatives that increase the carbon emissions reduction and the rainforests of the seeding the oceans. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. I next call the Honourable Winston Connolly of the Cayman Islands.
Good morning, and thank you, Honourable Speaker. My name is Winston Connolly, an MP for the Cayman Islands, and I rise to say that it's clear that COP21 has not secured the global carbon emissions cap. I thank the Honourable Parliamentarian from Sri Lanka for his contribution. And although 195 countries agreed to combat climate change, national targets remain voluntary and timeframes are non-binding. The INDCs, when aggregated, do not achieve the 2 degrees centigrade goal. Actually, it's 2.7 degrees centigrade. So further review is necessary every 5 years. Countries now have to sign the Paris Agreement and transform these INDCs into nationally determined contributions, or action plans will not achieve the targeted goal. Agreement still requires 55 parties covering 55% of the global emissions to ratify these agreements. This is a very tall order, Honourable Speaker, for the world to deliver a package of measures that will result in limiting global temperature rise to well below the 2% centigrade, let alone the 1.5% of pre-industrial levels. There will have to be a paradigm shift in the philosophy of political parties, because lip service and nods accompanied with little tinkering will not be enough to deliver the aims of the Paris Agreement. There's still a lot of uncertainties remaining in how these targets will be achieved, including the question of financing. The Paris Agreement has failed to secure a clear agreement on climate funds, leaving the numbers and financing mechanisms as well as accountability structures to be negotiated in the future. There's still a high level of unpredictability regarding the availability of climate finance, especially for developing countries to achieve their INDC targets. So, Madam Speaker, I think it's very clear that COP21 has not secured the global carbon emission cap. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. I now call upon the Honourable Jonathan Young from New Zealand. Sir.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And can I say thank you to Professor Lord Oxburgh for your address and for the confidence that you have shown us. 175 years ago, my forebears left this fair land and sailed across a horizon which they could not see the end result of their voyage. Yet they did it with faith, with confidence, with courage, with little to guide them but the stars in the sky. And yet here we are today living in a land called New Zealand, which is strong and vibrant and committed to the global community. And so, sir, your enthusiasm and your vision for those goals yet to be achieved, I believe, show to us the political leadership that COP21 has given to the world. We live in a time when the world has never been more capable, and correspondingly the world has never been more needful. The polarity of human experience continues to challenge us. It hasn't always been the case that we have pumped harmful gases into the atmosphere by the megaton. It hasn't always been the case that humans relied so heavily on non-renewable resources to move ourselves and the fruits of our hard work. Over the last couple of 100 years, our world has seen remarkable technological change that has changed the way we live, work, and even think. And as unprecedented economic development has lifted billions out of poverty into the more prosperous and mobile middle class, we live longer. More importantly, we live better lives. While remarkable, that development has come with a cost to our natural environment. And sir, madam, it is time for our nations of the world to address the consequences of our aspirations. New Zealand wants a deal that puts the world on a pathway towards limiting global temperature rise to no more than 2 degrees. Every country needs to contribute towards this goal. While New Zealand's emissions are small, only 0.25% on a global scale, we are determined to make a strong contribution to the international effort, and we trust that our example will inspire other smaller nations, because all the nations that are under 1% contribute to 25% of total global emissions. So it's important for us to realise that every single effort counts. Madam, the reason why I believe that COP21 will achieve the goals is because, firstly, there is political will. Firstly, there is an understanding of consequence that we must address. And secondly, we have the technological capability like never before to bring transformation to communities, nations, and our world. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I now call the Honourable Helen Sambili of Kenya.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. My name is Helen Sambili from the Kenya National Assembly, where we occasionally have Speakers Kamukunji, which is similar to this one. I stand to oppose this motion, Madam Speaker. Whereas substantial progress has been made, I think there are issues that have not been considered, one of which is to educate the people on the citizens themselves on the importance of focusing on clean energy. That, Madam Speaker, requires money and requires capacity building, which many nations, particularly the developing nations, do not have. And secondly, we note that 55 nations, which represent 55% of carbon emissions, have not ratified the Paris Agreement. That, Honourable Speaker, is quite significant. And we are told that they hope to do this by later this year. We can only hope. So really, we cannot say confidently that COP21 has secured or has made serious progress. So we suggest in Kenya, Madam Speaker, we are working hard to focus investment on clean energy. And so we are focusing on wind energy and focusing on solar energy. That we are blessed to have a lot of solar energy, but we do need money to be able to invest in that solar energy. So I would like to say that we have a long way, and I think the nations of the world need to seriously look at the issue and look at the real issues that interfere with the achievement of this COP21 agreement. Thank you, Honourable Speaker.
Thank you. And I now call the Honourable Mohammed Farooq Khan of Bangladesh.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, for giving me the floor, and I will oppose the motion. I am Farooq Khan from Bangladesh. COP, or Conference of Parties, has been held since 1995 under the leadership of United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. About 200 countries took part in the COP21, while world leaders such as the US President Barack Obama termed the climate change deal as best chance to save the planet Earth. Some over 65,000 people who gathered at the Eiffel Tower denounced the deal for setting the standards too low for success. Did the deal walk the talk, or was it all show? Madam Speaker, I also think that the climate change deal is a failure. My first point against the motion is the accord is probably legally binding, partially legally binding. Of the 31-page accord, 21 pages are legally binding. This is not enough. It also does not incorporate what governments can do and how they can be root of real changes. My second point is the agreement is weaker than Copenhagen. At least Copenhagen Agreement included aviation and shipping emissions, which is missing in this COP21 agreement and is inconsistent with latest scientific facts. For example, shipping and aviation emissions across the globe equals the total emission combined of United Kingdom and Germany. My third point is shortfall in funds. International Energy Agency IEA has concluded that transforming to a fossil fuel world will need about 1,000 billion US, whereas in this COP, there has been a commitment of only about 100 billion US. My fourth point is funds attached with the string. The Paris deal has equaled mobilizing financial resources to include loans, grants with conditions, and reallocation of the budgets and climate finance tag to money sent by poor migrants from rich nations to their families at home. It is just a farce. And finally, my last point is vague deal. This deal just talks of technologies, actions, without mentioning these at length. Even the term renewable energy is just mentioned once only in relation to Africa. This deal is just a lot of airy talk without much substance. Finally, Madam Speaker, much like every agreement, this Paris deal has its share of pitfalls, but it is where we need to stop and think. Ours and our future generation's survival is not negotiable and not a matter of debate only. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, sir. I now call the Honourable Abdullah Kawalde of Jordan.
Yes, thank you, Madam. Good morning, everybody. Please allow me to speak in a different way about Jordan. Jordan, you know, is a small country in the Middle East, which has been hammered, unfortunately, by many refugees since 1948, during two other people's mistakes that which we have to bear without, and we are accepting to bear these conditions. You know, in 1948 until today, we have refugees from the cause of Palestine, then the first Gulf War, the second Gulf War. And as you know, that nature always have a relationship between nature and human being, but definitely the population of Jordan has increased 3-4 folds in the more than the normal way that any country has been before. After all, definitely Jordan were present at the COP21 by His Majesty King Abdullah II and by the concerned ministers. We have ratified the Paris Agreement. In the meantime, the Jordanian Parliament and the country has approved a very moderate and, let's say, attractive law and regulations for really renewable projects. Jordan is looking by the year, let's say, 2020 to have more than 30% of its energy resources are from renewables. So we are taking this action very, very seriously in the country. And definitely, we have always been close to our region, where we have interconnection with countries like Egypt, Syria, Iraq, West Bank, and we are looking for, in the future, to have connections maybe with Turkey and start looking at Europe in the north. So I would say that what we need about really the emission of CO2 is really the big brothers in this world are to look into it more seriously than what they are looking at to it today, especially countries like the United States of America, countries like China, where they really have the major portion of really production of CO2 emissions, which is really hurting and really harming our planet Earth. So I would say that definitely COP21 in Paris is a very, very important step forward, but I think it needs to be followed seriously and continuously by people who are really concerned about the future of our nation, our people and our planet. And this will take a lot of measures more than what has been done in Paris COP21. We are looking for a better future for our children, and I think to do that, we really all to work together hand by hand to reach these goals in the near future. And thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. I now call the Honourable Michael Perkins of St Kitts and Nevis.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, fellow parliamentarians. As one from a very small island nation, Nevis in the Caribbean, I find that we from such areas, small islands, we face a dilemma. It's a sort of paradox in my opinion. For whereas the effects of climate change, and in particular global warming, whereas the effects of that would have or can have and has had rather major negative effects, devastating effects on some of our islands. The irony of that is that we from these islands are not the cause of it. And so, when we looked at what happened at COP21, I believe one of the major issues that were not addressed was the fact that these small island nations are affected in such devastating ways. But because of our small island population, because of our small landmass, we are not contributing in any significant way, negligible ways, if at all, to this overall global effect. On the other hand, if the developing nations of this world are to help us in our small island nation reach our goals of providing green energy, alternate forms of energy, by fast-tracking some of our projects like geothermal and solar and wind, I believe that would help us as small island nations to build upon our sovereign reserves, set aside funds for that, not rainy day, but that day when we would have been devastated by more hurricanes, more coastal erosion, and we would have set aside something, we would have be put in a better position to set aside our reserves so that when that day comes, we're able to recuperate or rebuild at a much faster rate and not have to depend so much on the very same developing countries who we look to in times of disaster. And so I believe COP21 missed out on that issue of not realizing that we from these small nations are not the cause of some of these devastating effects. And in my mind, because they have missed out on that, I think they would have failed in their objective. And that is my appeal, that we can fast-track our renewable energy endeavors more quickly with the help of the developing nations. Thank you.
Thank you. I now call the Honourable Njumi Peter Ambang of Cameroon.
Thank you, Right Honourable Speaker. I thank all my honourable colleagues for their very valuable contributions. Madam Chair, COP21 was very, very ambitious and remains historic. But to say that COP21 has achieved, I want to go to the word has achieved, global emissions cap is too much to say. It's like giving a child a name before the child is conceived. I think COP21 must have given hope, but has not achieved. I have the following reasons why I'm saying so. First of all, I want to quote James Hansen. As we all know, is the father of climate change awareness. And he calls Paris talks, I quote, a fraud. This former NASA scientist criticizes the talks in Paris as no action, just promises. The famous Paris Jamboree, to me, is going to remain paperwork if very serious measures are not taken. Today, many countries are still struggling with the legislation to go into the Paris agreements. One very important point that Paris missed out was the fact that Paris failed to put a tax on those countries or those companies that are still going to work on this emission of carbon. And today, Madam Chair, insofar as fossil fuels appear to be cheapest out there, definitely people will continue to be using them. Secondly, poor countries are also concerned that the money provided to them will not be nearly enough to protect them. And since the challenge is that there are never enough regulations to get the job done, there is wide room for failure to a certain extent. Thirdly, Madam Chair, not all the governments in Paris are ready to take this agreement seriously. First of all, we have to understand that in some of these countries where national interest has a conflict or is opposed to international conflict, future governments may tell you, Paris agreement, wait a bit, let's focus on national interest. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And I now call the Honourable Senator Osbert Frederick of Antigua and Barbuda. Sir.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Osbert Frederick from Antigua and Barbuda. And I rise to make my contribution to this motion and to lend my support to it. At the Paris conference where COP21 was conceived, France's president said, and I quote, "We have an opportunity to take the world, grasp it, so our planet may live a long time," end of quote. And I want to echo those sentiments today. Like Professor Lord Oxburgh, I am an eternal optimist. And I firmly believe that if COP21 has not secured the global carbon emission cap, it will happen. The journey of 1,000 miles always starts with a single step. And I am a firm believer that we have the political will to see this happening. I'm from a very small island state, twin island state, and like my colleague from Nevis said, very small. As a matter of fact, we have more beaches than square miles. And so we have seen the very serious impact of global warming on our small nation state. Coastal erosion. In my lifetime, I have seen portions of my country being eroded by as much as 2 meters in my lifetime. Increase in hurricanes over the last 30 years. We have had more than our, I won't even say fair share, unfair share of hurricanes. Drought. We are going through one of the most serious drought situations that I have seen in my lifetime. And I know that all of these are because of global warming, etc., climate change. And so I am a firm believer that COP21 will move forward. It will secure the global carbon emission cap, and that our countries will be better off for it. Again, I said I firmly believe there is the political will. In my country, we have started. We have just built a new airport terminal, and we have ensured that it is powered by solar energy. On our sister island of Barbuda that my fellow senator represents, we will make Barbuda totally green by the year 2020, and that's our way of starting. And so I want to end with Barack Obama. At the end of the Paris conference, he said, "This is huge. Almost every country in the world just signed on to the Paris Agreement in climate change. Let us move forward, if it pleases you, Madam Speaker."
Thank you, sir. And now the Honourable Kinoti Gatobu of Kenya.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I rise to oppose this motion that the COP21 has secured global emissions, a cap on global emissions. The reason why I believe we've not made the right steps in the right direction is because, as they say, all politics is local. When we leave the decision on carbon emissions to the entire world, and we allow all countries to retreat to their nations to make the decision and whether they will they will ratify the agreements in Paris, then I can assure you none of the 55 nations that account for more than 50% of these carbon emissions will assent to this. The reason is, when you go back to history, many of these countries have built their wealth through industrial revolutions. They've built their wealth through burning coal and fossil fuels, and that's how they've become wealthy nations. And when they see to it that going against carbon emissions will restrict the industrial growth, then none of them will sign it. The best thing I think we should have done in Paris is to set punitive measures on these nations. Otherwise, just making promises and leaving it to 55 nations to ratify them, for them to become legally binding, then I believe that is way out of the goals we should have set. And then the other thing is that we've set very far goals. We've said that by the half of this century, we must have gone below the 1.5 degree before the pre-industrial temperatures. That, I believe, is too far a goal to evaluate ourselves upon. We should have set yearly evaluations on what we want to achieve per year. Otherwise, it will just remain as a case of so many developing nations where they set so many visions far away, but when they get there, they realize they will not achieve it. The nations that progressed, we know of the 5-year plans in China, 5-year plans in Russia, and so on. And I believe if we were to set annual evaluation system of how do we evaluate the goals we are making towards achieving this, that would be good enough. And lastly, we should have set penalties for the top emitters. Otherwise, leaving it to their discretion on whether to agree to this or not, I believe we are just leaving the entire world to the mercies of the 55 nations that have made the same world. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, sir. I now call the Honourable Dr. Boyd Tawari from Trinidad and Tobago.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Honourable members, COP21 has facilitated a significant leap forward, but it seems to me that much more can be achieved in a much more sustainable way if 6 issues that I'm going to share with you are taken into account. So my position, articulating a position which I hope will resonate with the sentiments of the government and people of Trinidad and Tobago, is that the vision has been articulated, targets have been established, but to secure this, significant other interventions are needed. The first issue I wish to make is that I have to speak from the point of view of a country in which natural gas is still a major source of energy and will be for some time, given what exists in the country and the explorations that are taking place. And therefore, in the matrix that is being addressed in terms of clean energy, the issue of alternative energy for us is important, as indeed is the issue of renewable energy as an option. So that this mixed matrix and the approaches that are required for countries such as ours is very important. The second issue is the finance structures, mechanisms, and modalities, and the sustainability of these to make sure that the COP21 targets are in fact achieved. I think we have a real problem there, and that needs to be addressed. the need to challenge the existing structure of a consumer-driven global capitalism, which is supported by corporate advertising, marketing, PR, and branding, and lobbying. If this is not taken into account, it's going to be very hard to get anything done simply on the basis of a vision. The recognition of the need to make policy more responsive to the expectations and the aspirations of ordinary citizens and their communities. And that calls for a deepening and a broadening of the democratic process in many of our countries. The appreciation of the culture of creativity, entrepreneurship, and innovation that is needed to make the achievement of sustainable development possible, and the institutional apparatus that is required to make cultural shifts possible. These are the points that I would like to articulate. There are others, but I do not have the time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I now call the Honourable Njong Avaristus Ndim of Cameroon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm John Varistus from Cameroon. And I want to start by saying that I come from Cameroon, which is the African sub-region at the center, where we have forests, and we have the main rivers of Africa, and we have the Lake Chad Basin. And when I was growing up, we had the prevalence of fires, bushfires. We had prevalence of exploitation of timber. And most of us, when we had the long span of sunshine, we thought that it was witchcraft. Most of our parents, the rural areas, they thought that was witchcraft. But later on, if you get down to Cameroon today, you discover that even an old mother is feeling the effect of climate change. And they are already reversing their position and adopting new measures. We in Parliament, we have committees that are working to ensure that we educate the population, the masses that voted us to Parliament, on the issues of climate change. And we are very happy, and I believe that the Paris conference was a success, first and foremost because of the political will of my government. The head of state of Cameroon was there in Paris. And the leader of the Pan-African Parliamentary Network on Climate Change comes from my parliament. So we're quite informed and we're working. And if in 1992, this framework convention came out, and there have been a series of meetings, because it's difficult for the world now to come into one room and talk on an issue. And one of the main issues that has been so prominent has been the issue of climate change at all levels, from the highest to the lowest nations. So I want to say that at the level of, in Paris, just the mere fact that the political will was expressed, and almost all the countries of the world have come to accept that climate change is a major issue that must be tackled, or all perish. To me, that is a step forward. The next thing is the fact that the developed world has accepted that they can sacrifice to equalize in favor of the developing countries. We are happy with that. There is a budget. The African nations, there is a budget. Even if it's not clearly defined, but there is a budget. And we think that the goodwill that has been expressed, the education that is going on, the finances that are being put in place, it makes me conclude that Paris COP21 is definitely the beginning of a good journey. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I now call the Honourable Deborah Schultz of Canada.
Honourable Speaker, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to contribute to this very important debate. I must say it's clear that the world is far from securing the global emissions cap required. The attention in the world is finally on this looming challenge. However, we have a long way to go before we can be sure this ambitious target can be reached. The results of COP21 have provided a framework for action. However, the agreement still requires ratification to come into effect, and the intended national dedicated contributions, the INDCs, being brought forward are indicating the challenges ahead. Apart from the lack of an agreed approach to presenting the INDCs, which makes them difficult to compare or aggregate, and the lack of a common base year, the biggest problem with this bottoms-up approach is that the accumulated effect of all of these pledges would not be enough to limit the global temperature increases to 2 degrees C. This was confirmed by the Carbon Emissions Tracker, the CAT, and it was also concluded that other than the EU and China, most countries do not have the policies in place to meet the targets they have committed to. An analysis of 15 of these INDCs were rated by CAT. 7 were rated inadequate, 6 as medium, and only 2 as sufficient. This analysis by CAT shows that governments must significantly strengthen their INDCs. It is also clear from the analysis that the reductions must be accelerated if there is any hope of keeping the temperature increases to below the 2 degrees C. It is to be recognized that what has been done so far is to build a foundation that we can build on. It's a first step, one which over 100 countries have now pledged to improve. They are now calling for a 1.5 degree temperature goal, a clear pathway for a low carbon future and 5-year review, and a climate finance package. To this end, Canada has committed to $2.65 billion over 5 years to help developing countries tackle climate change, while we work with our provinces and territories to develop our own plan to convert from a fossil fuel dependent economy to a more sustainable future. We have still so much to be done. COP21 has not secured the global emissions cap. However, for the first time, there is acceptance that there is a problem with catastrophic consequences for all countries, and it cannot be ignored. For once, the whole planet must unite to adopt a low or zero carbon approach to energy use and ensure sustainability for the planet and our future. Thank you.
Thank you. I now call the Honourable Dr. Noor Azmi Ghazali of Malaysia.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would like to congratulate Lord Oxford and honourable parliamentarians who can see that the cup is half full and not half empty. 12 December 2015 will be remembered by generations to come because it is a history where the first ever universal commitment after 20 years of discussion legally bind to combat the climate challenge. We saw 195 countries declare together to put up a cap to the global warming. Putting promises on papers are easy and exciting and good, but it is definitely an essential part of a goal setting, where this is the motivation, this is the push, and these are the reminders for us to work towards our goal. But really making things happen, there are lots of challenges. A mission as big as this, with a time frame of 15 years, for sure, we must have a very big dream, a huge desire, a belief, a strong belief, and a proper planning and discipline to focus on its reality. There are challenges, but challenges do create opportunities. But we have to be optimistic. Questions like, how serious are the financial aids? What's the awareness of the world population like? Can developing countries continue and maintain the dreams to carry on? How many has submitted the INDC? How many has made the serious country targets? These are the questions and worries that crosses my mind as I praise and agree to the statement put. Madam Speaker, Malaysia has made a commitment right from the Rio de Janeiro Earth Summit in 1992. I still remember chairing the local agenda in my districts, local agenda 21 in my district 20 years ago. Although the world visibly failed to reach a satisfactory agreement on a successor to Kyoto Protocol in COP15 2009, but our Right Honourable Prime Minister pledged a conditional 40% carbon reduction of the GDP by 2020. We are ready. With the help, with the assistance from developed countries for the transfer of technology and also assisting in finance, we are serious about this. In Malaysia, the Ministry of Energy, Green Technology and Water, we created plans of actions, and also we passed a few new policies in the Parliament to focus on renewable energy, energy efficiency, green technology to face reduction in carbon and also to help to maintain the climate. We have done lots of projects of adaptation and mitigation to go towards this. In the 11th Malaysia Plan, we started this year, 2016, which holds inclusiveness and sustainability as pillars and to move ahead. The Minister of NRE recently has submitted our INDC on the 8th of January 16, reiterating that our commitment to keep our forest 50% and also to set a target of 45% carbon reduction by the year 2030. A journey 1,000 miles starts with the first step. I believe if we can walk the talk, if we can work together, all out, all hard, and be very optimistic, the cup is half full and it is not empty. We propose that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I now call the Honourable Haji Abdikarim Bu of Somalia.
Thank you very much, Madam, for giving me the floor. I believe that this COP21 is not a choice, but is the only game in town. If we go back to the mother of this COP21 is the Millennium Development Goals. If you look at the Millennium Development Goals and you follow it, you will find that at least 40%, 50%, or 60% of what it stands for were achieved. So this one, COP21, is just built on MDG, the Millennium. This one incorporates the weaknesses which were embedded in that one. And so, for example, now it's more extended. Things which were not included in the old one is included here, which is peace building, good governance, human rights, enforcement of parliament, and the local people. And that is actually very important because what happened in the other one was like, you will find schools built in places there are no people. Sometimes you find wells drilled in areas it was just more of political because the people were not involved. The people were not involved, but this one looks like it is people driven. So at least we will never find a school built in an empty place because people are involved, the parliaments are involved, everyone is involved. Before it was only the government, no consultation whatsoever. So this one is actually, I believe, will take us forward. It has some weaknesses like financing, but I believe we can work it out while we are on the go. We can repair things where this one is also very, very good. I mean, they can make showpieces for areas. For example, island people, the people who live in islands, they are very small. People who are coming out, countries who are coming out from war and civil wars like that, like Somalia, they are not carrying any package like subsidies, which are holding everyone, every other established country to move around. They are free from interested interests of corporates because everything. Oh, sorry. Salaam alaikum. Thank you very much.
Thank you for finishing so immediately upon my standing up. I now call the Honourable Yvonne Pearson of Guyana.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As I rise to make my contribution towards the motion being debated, I wish to say that COP21 has failed to secure global carbon emission cap. Madam Chair, we are all aware of climate change and global warming and the disaster that we face if we fail to address the issue. COP21, Paris. We've seen governments around the world made a very good attempt to address this issue. Countries submitted their intended, and I would like to underline the word intended, nationally determined contributions. Each of these plans set out the way in which the country intends to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Madam Chair, the United Nations Framework on Climate Change published an evaluation of these contributions. This study shows that despite the unprecedented mobilization shown by states, global warming would still be between 2.7 degrees Celsius and 3 degrees Celsius, which is above the threshold set out by scientists. This is one of the reasons why I say that COP21 failed to address the issue. Secondly, Madam Chair, more confusion. At this very conference, a high, ambitious coalition comprising of more than 100 countries, including the EU and the US, along with developing states and least developed states from the Caribbean, Africa, etc., and the Pacific. They were calling for further cuts to 1.5 degrees Celsius. It is not clear what is the final outcome, in my opinion. Is it 2.2 degrees Celsius, 1.5, 2.7, 3 degrees? What is it? Do we have a final outcome, a final decision? This is another reason why I say COP21 failed. Madam Chair, concerns, implementation. There are no clear guidelines on how this must be done. When does this agreement enter into force? Not until 55 parties sign on, and those 55 parties together must represent 55% greenhouse gas emission. In closing, Madam Chair, I would say this is lip service with a commitment of poor financing for developing countries. Thank you. And COP21 failed to address the real issue.
Thank you very much. I now call the Honourable Joseph Malouf of Lebanon. Sir.
Madam Speaker, I'm going back to the future on this, and I'm going to share with you a letter I received from my granddaughter, dated 1st April 2036. She's active in Mother Earth NGO, and she's attending a conference. Grandpa, I am at the Survival and the Will to Survive conference. I know you're an optimist, but I hate to disappoint you. I have some news. Agriculture has been affected dramatically by the climate control. The land for crops has been shifting north. As an example, corn crops in Canada and the US have gone down by almost 12%. And some plants, especially in terms of weeds and pests, are spreading to new areas. Water supplies have been affected, and this has affected the capacity of some hydropower plants to produce electricity. Even the shifting and the changing precipitory or precipitation patterns have affected the replenishment of underwater ground in many areas on the planet. Levels of lakes and rivers and streams have gone down. There are plenty of heat waves that have caused the death of more than 1 million people over the last 10 years. Diseases are spreading more. Obviously, a lot of plants are coming to life earlier, and this is causing disease to spread, especially with the longer life for ticks and mosquitoes. More than 1,000 animal plants and species of plants and animals have disappeared over the last 20 years. This was to name a few results that we have witnessed, Grandpa. You want to know why, Grandpa? First of all, the intended national designated contributions have not been respected and the obligations have not been met. Actually, only 30% over the last 20 years have proven to be sufficient, 55% medium, and the balance inadequate. And the sufficient have covered only 55% of the emissions. Grandpa, I hate to disappoint you, but we're still emitting 33 gigatons of emissions into the atmosphere per year. Grandpa, we have not been very faithful to the mindset that is required. Grandpa, I apologize to tell you, but the KPIs have not been very effective either. Accountability measures have not been effective. Therefore, Grandpa, disappointing you as much as I want to avoid it, I wish to tell you that COP21 definitely did not secure the cap.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And you will send our best wishes to your granddaughter. Tell her we liked her speech. I now call upon the Honourable Mo Radiali of Morocco.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. In my view, it seems premature and too early to say yes, because it is not even ratified to date. However, on the other hand, and especially for someone coming from Morocco, a world-leading country and who has and investing much and promoting green and clean energy, it is very difficult to say no. Madam Speaker, definitely COP21 has and gives hope since, firstly, it has been unprecedented because all nations have united. Yes, parties showed an unanimously goodwill and good intention to go ahead. Parties as well agreed on important topics and issues related to combating climatic change and other related matters. Parties at the same time have united for the first time and said stop to damaging the environment and compromising the lives of current and future generations, at least in theory. But there is still, and there will be major and real concerns. Are all parties, or will all parties ratify this protocol? Will it be possible for all parties to fulfill their commitments? Will all parties transform the goodwill they had into a reality? Can we tailor means and mechanisms and find tools to turn the goodwill into practice to secure the cap? Let's hope that an answer will be given in the near future, and I am sure pressure is needed from all actors so that our governments will do their best. I hope that the COP22 to be held in Marrakesh, Morocco, hopefully will give a positive answer to this question, and thank you.
Thank you, sir. I now call Senator Louis Sanchez Jimenez of Mexico.
La oportunidad que se me da. Vamos a esperar a se pongan sus audífonos. Gracias. Agradezco la oportunidad que se me da a dirigirme a este tan interesante auditorio. Reconozco en esta convocatoria un esfuerzo importante para reflexionar sobre los efectos del cambio climático y sus acciones que se han llevado a cabo. La COP21, como máximo foro de análisis y acuerdos entre las naciones, no ha dado los resultados suficientes para reducir la producción de carbono. Debemos reconocer que el desarrollo económico establecido es lo que nos tiene inmersos en este problema. La persecución de la acumulación de la riqueza se ha dado sin considerar el daño a nuestra madre tierra. Reconozcamos que esa acumulación de riqueza nos lleva a que el 1% de la población posea el 50% de la riqueza que se produce en el mundo. Mientras que esto no se corrija, no podremos resolver de fondo el problema que hoy nos congrega. Con la revolución industrial se inicia la devastación intensiva de los recursos naturales y junto con una sociedad consumista que hemos establecido, forman un círculo vicioso: más consumo, más devastación, más contaminación. Luego entonces estos modelos deben cambiar. Asistimos probablemente a los últimos años del consumo de hidrocarburos. Aún con el descubrimiento del shale oil, por cierto, el sistema de explotación de este recurso impacta severamente el medio ambiente y se pretende seguir desarrollando. Hablar de energías limpias, de energías renovables, nos lleva a reconocer que no hay un desarrollo tecnológico suficiente. Las celdas voltaicas tienen altos costos y aún no se resuelve el problema de sus acumuladores. Les pregunto a sus señorías, ¿creen ustedes que podríamos resolver este problema del cambio climático mientras que países, potencias económicas, se sigan negando a reconocer sus efectos? Insisto, la acumulación de capital en unas cuantas manos no tiene sentido ante un planeta que sufre sus efectos. Tarde o temprano tendremos que reconocerlo y remediarlo. Hoy tenemos la oportunidad de reflexionar sobre ello. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, sir. And finally, to sum up the debate, I call upon the Honourable Alexis Jeffers of Nevis Island. Sir.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to address my colleagues and you as well as the Speaker of this House. Madam Chair, I live within the boundaries of realism and pragmatism. That's how I've guided my life ever since I've known myself. And when I look at this, this issue before this Honourable House, as to whether COP21 secured global carbon emission cap, I have to say that one has to look at the fact that we have a problem on our hands. And once you accept the fact that you have a problem, the question is, how do you deal with it? COP21, in my opinion, would have set out targets and mandates as to how to reduce consumption and reliance on fossil fuel, and replace it with alternative renewable energy. Now, though we come from various regions across the globe, as developing and developed countries, we face common socio-economic problems and challenges. And these can only be addressed through proper utilization of our natural and human resources, that is, towards achieving sustainable and developing societies. Now, if we are to understand that we have a problem on our hands and we have to do something about it, the question is, where do we start? And I do believe COP21 is a start or a continuation of many of the steps that would have been taken in the past. Now, there may be many doubters out there, but we need believers. We need politicians, we need policymakers who have the fortitude to get the job done. And I do believe that even though we have varied views on this issue, we all have the capacity as developing and developed countries to do something about the challenges that we face. And I do believe significant steps were taken at COP21. And I want to say that we have had a crucial moment placed before us in terms of the storyline that the world will have to use to respond to climate change. The risks associated with climate change are not supposed to be a fear for us today, but it should be seen as something that we can utilize whatever is before us to eliminate whatever risk that our future generations would face. Now let me talk about the small island developing states from where we come from, or where I come from in Nevis. We have come to the realization that global carbon emissions and its harmful effects are no longer subject matters for scientists and policymakers, but it is rather an awakening of all of our citizens and territories in the Caribbean to the fact that this phenomenon is real. We see it every day. We have experienced some of our worst drought conditions in recent years. And as such, we are indeed on the pathway of making or utilizing the indigenous renewable energy resources that are available to us in the Caribbean, such as wind, solar, and now geothermal energy, so as to achieve energy security and to ensure that we have sustained socio-economic development in our countries, thus enabling this generation and future generation to achieve or reap the benefits of our action today. 4 minutes ago?
Doesn't time fly? I was going to allow the honourable gentleman one final rhetorical flourish. I was going to allow the honourable gentleman to give the final word of the debate. Thank you very much indeed. This has been an excellent debate. It's been fascinating to hear this important subject considered from the points of view of so many different places all over the world, and I'm quite sure that when your contributions are read and considered, they will form a very important part of the ongoing debate in many legislatures and consideratory bodies around the world. I'm now going to put the question to the Assembly. The question is that this Assembly agrees that COP21 has secured the global carbon emissions cap. As many as are of that opinion, say aye and raise your hand. Say aye.
Could you keep your hands raised?
Can you keep your hands raised until we can count you, please? Yes. And those of the contrary opinion, say no and raise your hands. No. Thank you very much. It is fairly decisive. I can announce that the noes have it by a majority of 25 to 12. Thank you very much indeed. Are we going to have a...
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I think that we would all like to thank very much the Deputy Speaker for her time and amazing presiding of this session.
I do hope that you enjoy the rest of your time here in Westminster and in London, and I apologise that climate-wise here, it is very sunny today, but for many of you, rather cold. But I'm afraid that is the norm here. but I hope that you enjoy your time here very much indeed, and we're delighted that you're visiting us. Thank you.